To marry your high school sweetheart, have beautiful children, and live happily ever after is every teenage girl's dream. This was Jill Wells' dream, and her husband Larry was making them all come true, until their dream turned into their nightmare in the early morning of June 29th, 2013. This is Larry Wells' life and death through the eyes of strangers. Larry and Jill Wells, the proud parents of a 4-year-old daughter and a second child on the way, were high school sweethearts who were enjoying family life until Larry's tragic death in Hamburg, New York in late June of 2013. Lawrence Wells II was born to Lawrence Wells I and Vicki on September 22nd, 1977 in Dunkirk, New York. Growing up in the small community of Leon, where the neighborhood kids all knew each other and the school they attended was small and quaint. As Larry grew up, his passion for watching and playing sports was evident, and he loved to do it. If it wasn't football, it was basketball. With the same jersey numbers throughout the years he played, you always knew who number 36 was on the field. Larry was timid and shy until you got to know him, and then he brought out the character in it. Larry met his wife Jill when they were 15 years old and in the 9th grade. They had went to college together, and from there they were always together, Jill has stated. Jill spoke to an outlet and talked about Larry's time working in the Frontier Central School District as an elementary school teacher and his love for the classroom and his children. When he was a teacher, if he had a little kid who had problems at home, he would take them under his wing and make sure that they had the best possible life while they were at school. When economic conditions the way they were left Larry unable to land a permanent teaching job, true to his character, he immediately took steps to provide for his family, in which that meant taking a job at the local Toys R Us. Jill stated, "We were ready to buy a house and started a family. He couldn't get a full-time teaching job, so he did what he had to do. What began as a temporary plan to provide for the family became a second career. Larry moved up the corporate ladder into management, bringing with him the positive, upbeat attitude that he owned in the classroom. If one of his co-workers was having a bad day, he would do whatever he could to cheer them up, to make them have a better day. That's who Larry was. A true family man. Life in the retail world meant chaotic hours, overnight shifts, holidays, and plenty of weekends. That's why Larry was working before 5 a.m. on that dreadful Saturday morning. He was very family-oriented. If he wasn't at work, he was with his family. Larry was always doing something with their daughter, Maddie. It often involved trips to Chuck E. Cheese or an afternoon spent at Bounce Magic. You would find both of them there. Larry and Maddie were just regulars at the park, just a short walk from their home. Jill, Larry's wife, has stated that he loved to go anywhere and spend time with their daughter. He was crazy about the beach, too. Just months before his death, the three of them returned from a family vacation from Myrtle Beach. Jill said the family had a great time, and those are the memories she will cling to. While trying to cope with her husband's death, it's difficult caring for a 4-year-old daughter while preparing for the arrival of their second child, a baby girl that was due the following December. Jill is trying to do her best to adjust to life without the love of her life. On that Saturday morning, June 29th, 2013, Larry Wells, an assistant manager at McKinley Parkway store, was at work in the early morning hours like many other mornings. A handful of employees were working in the store between roughly 1 and 5 a.m. One of the employees heard the alarm going off and tried to radio Larry to shut it off. When there was no answer, another employee went to Larry's office to find him. The employee found Larry in his office bleeding to death. She immediately called 911 and he was rushed to Mercy Hospital. Hamburg police were called to the Toys R Us on McKinley Street just before 6 a.m. that Saturday morning. Officials say that a male employee of the store was assaulted inside and had been taken to Mercy Hospital. The victim, Lawrence Wells, was in grave condition. Shortly after Larry was rushed to the hospital, he was pronounced dead. Hamburg Detective Thomas Best has stated that the doors to the store were locked while 3 employees were inside prior to the store opening at 9 a.m. They were unloading trucks and stocking shelves. Police say it's hard to determine if the attack happened while employees were still inside or if the incident happened before they arrived. In the days ahead, the detectives had the difficult task of trying to determine whether the killing was a robbery or a targeted attack. Investigators also didn't rule out the possibility that the attack was carried out by a disgruntled employee or an ex-employee. Larry Wells was stabbed 2 to 3 times by someone who had entered his tiny office. When the office was emptied, the killer shut the door behind him and then dismantled the TV surveillance system about 7 minutes later. An important piece of evidence was left behind at the scene of the murder. The security DVR unit had been unplugged, and there was a 2007 University of Florida Gators cap left on the floor. Both needed to be tested. They also summoned the store's loss prevention expert Bernard Gruggia to walk them through viewing whatever security footage had existed. Bernard was more than happy to help with anything the detectives needed because he led them to believe Larry was his friend. Bernard was the one, it's been said, who had hired Larry. The video showed a man clearly in disguise entering the store at 4:24 a.m. Detectives believe the suspect understood the store's layout and security well, based on the way he zigzagged around aisles, avoiding the security cameras. In the pre-dawn hours of June 29, 2013, at 4:32 a.m., the figure entered Larry's office. At 4:39 a.m., the footage cut out the power cord on the DVR being pulled. At some point between 4:40 and 5:10 a.m., Larry entered the office and was stabbed 3 times in the upper body. Investigators found usable DNA on the Gators hat and swabbed dozens of employees and potential suspects, but located no match. People in Hamburg began to talk, worry that someone was going to get away with Larry's murder. Larry's murder left a gaping hole in the community, and people wanted to know why. Why here, in a town where serious crime is unheard of? Why Larry? He was a man who, by all accounts, was a devoted husband and father, and the kind of manager people considered themselves lucky to work under. Nobody could fathom why someone would kill Larry Wells, the well-liked manager of a New York Toys R Us. Thanks to low-resolution surveillance cameras and no eyewitnesses to the crime, the police had made no arrest. There was talk early on of multiple suspects. Retracing their steps, investigators realized that they were missing a DNA swab from one person close to the crime, Bernard Gruggia, the loss prevention expert that had been the authorities' go-to guy to help with the investigation. The same guy who was at the store early that morning of Larry's murder, consoling other employees. He kept finding excuses for why he didn't have time to be swabbed. On August 14, 2013, they cornered Bernard at his father's house, telling him that he really needed his DNA, and the swab only took 20 seconds. On October 17, 2013, at roughly 100 days since the murder, Bernard's results came back as a match for the Gators hat that was found that early morning at the crime scene. Detectives went to his home immediately and confronted him on camera in case he made a confession. Bernard continually insisted his innocence. even though there was the proof of DNA evidence law enforcement now had. While speaking to law enforcement as they told Bernard the results of the DNA test, he then told law enforcement, "Whatever, guys. Great. I didn't do it. This is crazy." Bernard was arrested that day and charged with Larry's murder. While law enforcement was searching his house, authorities found stockpiles of electronics and toys. Bernard was selling the merchandise on eBay. He was quaintly well-suited to rip off the company that employed him. While Bernard Grugia's homicide arrest that week was a shock to many, the regional loss prevention manager does have a criminal past. In addition to his second-degree murder charge, Bernard was arrested June 8th at his Kettle Run home in Alma, New York, just 3 weeks before Larry's murder. Bernard Grugia was charged in the domestic incident with harassment and illegal possession of a 9mm handgun. It was also confirmed there that he had been a series of domestic calls to the address in the past. The Sheriff's Department says Bernard's wife took out an order of protection against him following the June arrest. Bernard's wife experiences violent and bizarre in nature, according to authorities. When he was arrested in June, he pushed and shoved his wife, then ran upstairs to the master bedroom in their sprawling hillside Alma home. The next thing Heather Grugia heard was a gunshot from the bedroom. On the same day he was arrested, Bernard Grugia was polite and calm when he went before the judge. He told the judge he was being represented by Buffalo defense lawyer Frank T. Hausch. Bernard entered a not guilty plea, and he was not eligible for bail because of the seriousness of the charge in Larry's murder. On Monday, April 7, 2014, Bernard Grugia accepted a plea deal during a court appearance in State Supreme Court in Buffalo, New York. Bernard Grugia pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter for allegedly stabbing Lawrence C. Larry Wells II to death at the Toys R Us store on June 29th. He was originally charged with second-degree murder. Bernard's attorney has stated to several news outlets that his client did not wish it to happen. It did happen. He was responsible for it. He's taking full responsibility, and he hopes that it brings some closure. Bernard Grugia was a regional director for Toys R Us and knew Larry quite well. Bernard's attorney had stated Bernard went to the store to steal money from the safe. His family was facing bankruptcy and had debts to pay because his wife had been battling breast cancer. Bernard Grugia stabbed Larry Wells twice and showed up hours later at the scene, hugging and comforting the employees. As a part of a later plea deal, Bernard Grugia admitted to using his role in loss prevention to steal more than $200,000 worth of merchandise from the Toys R Us store. He also pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter, admitting that he had entered the store that June morning with the intention of robbing the safe. He was in financial trouble and had debts totaling $1.2 million and a $450,000 home, a late-model Cadillac Escalade. In July of 2014, a judge handed him the harshest penalty available in the state of New York on the charge of 25 years in prison and 5 years of probation. Law enforcement described Bernard a sociopath for how he carried out his actions of that early morning. Larry's wife Jill had stated in her victim impact statement that Grugia had stolen her husband and her best friend. Quote from Jill, "We were supposed to grow old together, raise our children together, and watch them grow. But instead, Larry was taken from us. Our daughter, who was 4 at the time, lost the best father she could ever have. Larry and Jill did everything together, and Jill did not understand how someone could have taken her daughter's father from her. Some can't and won't forget, however. They don't have the luxury of going back to work, back to school, back to their lives, where the murder fades into a memory. Just another headline story that leads the evening news for a couple of nights before slipping into the criminal archives." Behind every victim you see is a family, and those families are invariably left shattered. How do they go on? How do they find the strength to bury a loved one? Indeed, how does the Wells family face Larry's birthday and the holidays without him? Bernard took the life of a small-town man whose passion was his family and friends. Larry's murder shocked the small community where he had grown up in. Larry will never be able to watch his girl's first day of school, first dance, graduating, and never be able to walk his daughters down the aisle for their big day, because a self-centered excuse of a human being who chose to kill a man who worked hard for what he earned and what he had in life. Bernard Gruggia not only ruined his life over his actions of greed, he has ruined many others. Larry was taken away maliciously from his wife Jill Wells, whom he married July 31st, 2004, and their daughter Madison. Jill was pregnant at the time of Larry's death with their second daughter, who was born early December, Peyton Larin. The name suits her well. Jill and her daughters never returned to the home the couple shared, the grief and pain unimaginable and too difficult to face. With the help of her family, she and her girls relocated. Journalist Matt Chandler was inspired by Larry's wife Jill after Larry's murder. She helped Maddie, her and Larry's daughter, deal with Larry's murder by writing notes and sending them via balloon to heaven. Chandler wrote a children's book afterwards, and a picture of Larry, Jill, and their daughter was given to the illustrator to use in the book. The book, Balloons to Heaven, was released a year after Larry's death at a balloon release to celebrate Larry's life. 300 people attended the balloon release and wrote notes and tied them to the balloons and released them to heaven. Hundreds of copies of the book were sold that day, and the money was given to Jill for her and Larry's daughters. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get further updates and follow us on Facebook, The Missing Truth.